Welcome everyone to Change Management. It's a special edition webinar. We usually have a webinar every 2 weeks, but we decided to put on this one on change management just at the end of the year to help with any of you that might be thinking of a major change project going on into next year. My name is Dwight Maholitz. I'm the President of Effective Managers. I'm delighted to host you today and am looking forward to sharing this content with you. As you know, change management can be a huge subject, so I'm really going to be covering the highlights for you and giving you some insights and hopefully some tips that can help you in change management programs in your organization. So the starting point is, how can we succeed at change management? If we're thinking about launching a change management program, the issue is that we want to change something in the organization, and of course we want to be successful at that change. Unfortunately, the deck is kind of stacked against us. If you look at most of the management sciences books, the methods that are brought forward tend not to work as well in organizations as one might expect. So what works in one organization doesn't necessarily work in another organization. So I think a key thing to put in mind here is that what I'm trying to give you today is a generic approach which you would have to think about and adapt to your organization and your organizational situation. So the starting point then is what is change management? And here's the definition I got from the Google search. I think Google relies on the Oxford Dictionary for most of its definitions. The management of change and development within a business or similar organization. So that's not too helpful, really. It's kind of circular in its definition, but it does give us the insight that what we're really thinking about is our business or our organization, and how are we going to develop the organization, in other words, to improve it, and what is the science of the management change that we need to put in place to accomplish that. My definition is a little lighter at heart, but I think gets right to the heart of the matter. If you want to implement a successful change, there are 5 key factors to bear in mind. So the first one is commitment, the second one is engagement, and the third, fourth, and fifth are focus, focus, focus. So what I want to do today is talk to you about these areas in terms of change management, some things to think about each one of them. I'll then cycle back on some of the other aspects that need to be borne in mind, and then finally a little bit about the importance of assessing your organization and knowing where it is to start, and then we'll close. So we've got about 25 minutes left, and I hope to be able to cover this off in that period of time. So the first is commitment. The starting point is that the change process, any significant change process in the organization, really does require a committed leader. So someone that is going to stay the course, someone that is going to really ensure that there is a reinforcement of the change as it takes place throughout the organization. If it's an organization-wide change, then this committed leader needs to be the CEO of the organization. That's not to say that others can't be heavily involved in the project and do a lot of really good work in it, but the point is that if you want to have change that's going to stick in the organization, it really does need to start at the top. Now, you can define organization in different ways. So if you're the head of a large business unit, you might be the head of that part of your organization. So you could be the committed leader for your organization. The one caveat I have is that to implement significant change within an organizational unit can be even more difficult if it's working contrary to the culture of the organization as a whole. So to the extent that you have control within your piece of the organization over all aspects of the change, then absolutely you can be successful. If you don't have control over all aspects, so for instance you're talking about changing roles and you don't have authority over pay scales and positions, then you may be less successful. It doesn't mean that it's not worth doing, but you have to understand the constraints that you're working within. The takeaway I would have on the commitment section is that things worth achieving require effort, and great things require great effort. So in life, things don't come free. It's the same in organizations. If we really want to accomplish a significant change, we do have to have a commitment that we're going to require resources to be able to achieve that change. And the resources are typically for significant change projects a mix of internal and external resources. And both of those have a cost to you in your organization. So in terms of internal resources, time and effort are a real cost that need to be factored in. So if you have an internal project team, the time of that internal project team will be devoted to the change, that will be devoted to the change will detract from their ongoing operational accountability. So we need to bear that in mind. External resources could be external consultants that are bringing in expertise to support the change, also come at a cost which tends to be more monetary, but also bearing in mind that even when you do bring in an external resource, they do depend on individuals within the organization for success for the change process. So always you have to balance this internal and external resource requirements. The third point on this slide is that it's necessary to plan to stay with the project through at least one business cycle. And the reason for that is that if you lose sight of it as the head of the organization, then the risk is that even though you believe that there is a significant change underway, as it works its way through and down the organization, it can lose steam. So in other words, it's not being implemented and not being nurtured and not being supported. So as the CEO or the head of the organizational unit that is accountable for the change, make sure that you stick with it throughout that business cycle, that the change isn't finished once it leaves your management table. You need to really have a plan in place to support this change as it flows down throughout the rest of the organization. I'll come back to this a bit when I talk about planning later on in the presentation. So just a summary slide then on the commitment section, that really managerial leadership practices do start with the CEO. So it's not do as I say, not do as I do. In fact, it has to be that the CEO does demonstrate whatever the change is going to be. And I'm introducing here the concept of managerial leadership practices because successful change does depend on the engagement of the managers throughout your organization to embrace and to implement that change. So that's a nice segue then into my next slide, which is talking about engagement. So engagement is the second principle in terms of a successful change program, and I think of engagement in two directions. So the first direction is shown by the arrows on the side of the screen here, on the left-hand side of the figure. So we're gathering information from the bottom of the organization all the way to the leader of the organizational change, because we need to understand the situation in which managers are situated. We need to understand what they're facing in their day-to-day lives, and we need to understand what the impact of this change is going to have on them, both positive and negative, because usually change isn't free. It's not always a good news story. So we have to build in that input to really understand and develop and create that change program. I then suggest that for success we need to implement that change in natural teams. So the first step in the change process is the CEO and the vice presidents actually work through the change process. What was the decision for the change? What is the impact for us in each one of our functions? How is it going to change the way that we work together? How is it going to change the way in which we delegate our work? If it's a new tool, how do we use that tool in different areas? If it's a new process, what are the interfaces and the linkages between us? So that really at an appropriate level in the organization and an appropriate level of detail, the CEO and the vice presidents ensure that they're absolutely on the same page. And at that table, they agree on what's going to happen at the next step. And the next step of the change you see in the blue triangle here, where each vice president then replicates that session with their directors. So, what was the decision that was made? What is the impact on us? These are the agreements that I made. These are the implications for handovers and so on. So that same discussion, but at a different level of detail, is held. And similarly, at that meeting, the VP then has the discussion with the directors to say what they will be held accountable for, rolling it down to the next level of the organization for round 3, which would be the director-manager level. The arrows on the side also become important here because in this implementation step, we also need that feedback loop. Did we understand the messaging that we got from you when we first started the change process? Do you understand the implications of this change? Are there any unintended consequences or unforeseen consequences that we need to be aware of, which might actually cause some rethinking to take place as you iterate back up the organization to get that information in place? So the key here is that you really have a well thought out, well supported process for delegating this work as it goes down the organization. You typically would have external consulting at the top of the organization, supported by the internal management team, and then as you go down the organization, the internal project team would do most of the work, but supported by the external consultant. The other aspect of engagement that I like to draw attention to is that change shouldn't be theoretical. So this last process that we had isn't make work, and it's not talking about a theory. It's really natural teams working together in manager-direct report relationships to understand how they're going to work differently working forward. So this natural team approach, starting at the top, cascading its way down, is really a necessary aspect of the work. So people should come into and go away from that work feeling, wow, this has helped me in these challenges, and it has helped me understand the change, and I am working differently, and in fact we've made some real accomplishments in this meeting that we just had. I've got two thoughts left on engagement. This one is that if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. I really like this saying because it reinforces the importance of the change project. So it can't be the CEO and the senior management team sitting at the top of the organization making a decision, making the pronouncement on high, and then sending out an email on how people will work differently. It really does need to be a collaborative project and process where people will work together as they move forward. The last point I had on dissonance, and this would deserve a whole half hour in and of itself, but the concept here is that people are in different kinds of situations. And even though a change is good in all respects, or is going to be beneficial to the work process, that doesn't mean that people will be accepting of the process. The simplest example I could think about this is if you have old cell phone technology. So your organization provides cellular telephones, mobile phones for everybody in the workplace, and they're really old. They're 4 generations old. They're dropping calls. They're not working very well. They don't have the features of the modern phones. They're dying, and so on. So it would seem to be a no-brainer that everyone would welcome a replacement of the telephones. But in fact, there's a certain predictability about how that phone is working. So there will be a substantive part of the workforce who will be comfortable with that existing flawed technology. So even though it doesn't work very well, the results are predictable. They know how it's going to work. They know they're going to have to allow a certain amount of time to do things. They know what it will do and what they won't do, versus this new technology that's coming in, which will do unknown things. So what's necessary is to create this dissonance between the individual and that existing situation, whereby they can understand and agree that the existing technology no longer suits their needs. So the change process really has to start where the individuals are and understand that everybody might not necessarily be bought in. I have articles on my website about dissonance. I know it's a complex situation to think about in these 2 minutes that I have to talk about this, but it is something to understand before you start on a major change program. The third, fourth, and fifth elements were the focus. So the point that I want to make here is that it's important to pick only one challenge at a time. It's very tempting in organizations when you have change underway to tackle all of those things which are issues. The risk is that by trying to do too much, you can bite off more than is possible to accomplish and end up failing on all fronts. rather than picking that one or those two things which you can do very well and succeed at doing those, and then coming back and then initiating a change process for the third or the fourth thing. So pick the challenge that's the most fundamental, the most important that needs to be changed. Focus on reaching that solution, and then ensure that your executive team does not lose sight of that initiative. This refers a little back to the commitment aspect that I made. So part of the focus is not only on how it changes our work, but how is it changing the work of all of those other individuals in the organization that are being impacted on it, and reinforcing that and nurturing it and celebrating successes and so on. So this keeping the eye on the ball is important. The situation I so often see in organizations that I work with is that the executive team makes the decision, they implement the solution at their level, they delegate it down to the next level, and then they move on to the next thing. And by losing that focus on this change, what happens is the next thing gets the attention, and the first thing isn't implemented appropriately or in the fullness that it should. So the thought that I leave you with on this one is pace yourself. An elephant can be swallowed, but only one bite at a time. So pick your bites, understand what is the solution that can be attained within that period of time, scope out the project that makes sense, and then move forward with it. So that brings us just a bit past halfway in the webinar. I now wanted to change focus a little bit to talk about some of the processes that are important to have in place for the change project. So we've talked about the 5 principles, the commitment, the engagement, focus, and we'll now move on to some other tools that are really important to have in place for success in change. So the first one is project scope. And it's really important that you write down the scope of the project. What is it that we want to accomplish? What is the problem that we're trying to address? What is the current state in which we are now, and what is the vision for the future for when we're completed this change program? So by writing down the mission, our current state, and this vision, we're then able to enunciate those statements of change and the resource requirements that will be necessary for it. It also provides a huge amount of information for the change process in terms of communication throughout the organization, because by explaining and writing down in crisp and clear terms what the issue is, what we're tackling and what we're trying to accomplish, and then that vision for that future state that's going to be rosy and sunny and accomplish all of the things that we need it to accomplish, really does help people buy into the overall change process. The other aspect of the scope is to really delineate the roles. What is the role of the CEO in the project, of each of the vice presidents, of each of the directors? What are the key change agents? If it's an IT project, what's the key role of IT? If there's an internal project team, what is the key role of the project manager, and what are the accountabilities and authorities of that person? So that by thinking that through, you have an understanding of what each person should be accountable for doing, what is the authority that they have to do it. So it just helps clarify individuals' roles as you go through the process. And then get the CEO to sign off on the change program. We are changing the CEO's organization, and the CEO needs to be bought in to the entire change and agree that this is in fact the scope, that these are in fact the objectives, that this is in fact the vision for that future, so that there's no misunderstanding at the end of the project when it comes time for the sign-off. The next aspect is accountability and authority. And for any of you that have been in any of my webinars previously, you know that I'm a huge fan of clarity of accountability. In fact, clarity of accountability is central to managers being effective in their work. So the CEO, executives, and managers are each accountable for the change in their own areas. A really, really fundamental mistake that's often made in organizations is that the head of the internal project team, the project director or project manager, is seen to be accountable for the project. And that is absolutely not the case. It's the CEO that is accountable for the overall change project. And as I said before, the CEO doesn't need to do all the work, but the CEO is accountable for the results that are going to take place in the organization, needs to delegate clearly to the vice presidents what they're accountable for in terms of the change, and hold them accountable for implementing that change in their area. And then similarly, the executives will hold their directors accountable, directors will hold their managers accountable. So in the absence of this, what happens is that you're making that project manager accountable for something for which they do not have the authority to be able to be successful. So they don't have the authority to instruct the directors or the managers to do something with respect to a change program. Only their boss is able to do that within the organization. So let's keep it clear that the managers that are accountable for the individuals in the organization are accountable for the changed work habits, behaviors, processes, whatever, within that department and across that team, not the project team. Now, the project team has accountability and authority. They're accountable for coordinating the project, for monitoring it, for providing training and other services, for supporting the program in whatever way. And that differentiation needs to be documented and understood. And then, as part of that process, we can document the accountability and authority statements for each change role so that each individual is quite clear and can be called to account. That's what accountability is, can be called to account for their aspect of the change. I also highly recommend that you have a plan. So whether it's a relatively straightforward change or a complex 4-year change, that there be a plan put in place for what's going to happen when. This is a very generic plan that I've put in place for a 1-year change project, where you will see that the first month is pretty much set up taken in setting up the project, setting up identifying and appointing the project teams, setting up the project scope, doing the project planning, doing focus group, gathering additional information, developing materials, and training the internal team in terms of the objectives of the program and any specialized expertise that they might need. Of course, external consulting expertise, I know I would say that as a consultant, but external consulting expertise can be most helpful at this time of the project because this is when they can bring in experience, tools, materials, methodology, and help you from reinventing the wheel so that you can get up and running up and started faster. The real change program here only starts almost midway down the program, where we have this CEO executive session. So it's at the beginning of month 3 in this example, where that first implementation meeting is held, where the CEOs and the vice presidents begin operating under the new structure, whatever that might be in terms of the change. And then it rolls out throughout that. The other aspect you see here is communication planning and communications, which is a wonderful segue into that slide, because communication is critical in any change program. And as you see here, the single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place. Very often, communication is seen as a town hall meeting, a newsletter, emails from the CEO, going out to the workforce to talk about the change and its importance and so on. And I'm sorry to tell you that's not communication. It's a part of the communication, but the real meaningful communication that must be in place is an engagement between each manager and their direct reports in terms of what the change is, what the impact is on their department, and what the impact is on each individual. And the reason each manager needs to be engaged is because it is only the manager that will understand the change in the terms that are going to be meaningful to their direct reports. So the messaging, all those other things that I talked about, they're important. The town halls, the email, the change statements, and so on from the top of the organization are important because they set the scene for the whole change. But the VPs also need to have that conversation with each director. The directors need to have that conversation with each manager, and the managers need to have that conversation with their frontline employees so that they can translate this change and the impact of the change in meaningful terms to each employee. The next slide I'm talking about is the internal-external team approach. I talked about that a little bit earlier in an earlier slide, but the internal team really knows the organization and its culture, so you need people inside the organization driving the change. The external team, external management consultants or other experts have the experience and the tools and that can bring it to the organization. And critical here is this transfer of knowledge and skills. So never engage a consulting organization to support you unless there's a firm commitment that knowledge and skills will be transferred so that you have that expertise in the organization to continue on after the end of the formal change program. So in summary, and then I'll have, I think, 3 or 4 slides right after the summary. So the summary of the change program is, number 1, change is difficult. Number 2, more change initiatives fail than succeed. In fact, managerial sciences literature shows that 60% of change initiatives fail to deliver the results. So the majority of change programs fail to deliver results. Change is possible, but it can pay huge dividends. So remember those 5 keys, the commitment, engagement, and focus in terms of your change program. I wanted to say just a few words about assessing your organization, because the other aspect of successful change is knowing what your system is like. So if you're going to successfully change a system, you need to know what's happening in the system and what's going to happen. And the situation today is that most managers are not able to focus on the value-added work that they should be focusing in on. And in fact, our research with the University of Ottawa in our effective managers research shows that managers only spend 55% of their time doing value-added work. So I highly recommend that you engage some kind of an assessment process. Of course, I recommend the Effective Managers Survey, which is an unobtrusive way of getting information, but it tells you exactly what the situation is of your managers. How engaged do they feel they are in the organization? How clear is the delegated accountability that they have for success? What percentage of their time are they doing or spending on what they would call value-added work? Traditional employee engagement surveys tend to only go down to the symptomatic level, so it's really important to get to that root cause to understand what the situation of managers is, because you will rely on all of those individuals in the organization who have managerial accountability for success in the change program. So I urge you to understand their situation, if not through a survey tool such as the one that we can provide, then through focus group work, so that you are engaging them, getting their information, and working through that with them. The last 2 slides, the final slide, is to just let you know that we have our next 2 webinar series are now posted. So on Wednesday, January 7th, we'll be doing a webinar on, do we really need to have this meeting, which I think will resonate with most of you, and then on January the 21st on partner firms, how we collaborate on the Effective Managers Survey. So that brings us to a close here for the formal part of the presentation. I do want to thank you very much for your participation today. Please do check out my website for additional information. There are articles on all of these subjects that we have talked about today, where you can dig deeper if you'd like to get some additional information. If you'd like some daily management tips, do feel free to follow me on at Dwight Mahaltz on Twitter, and you can sign up for our free monthly newsletter on effectivemanagers.com. And finally, I'm always happy to connect on LinkedIn, because I find that just an excellent tool for keeping in touch. So that brings us to 12:30 on the minute. I did say that I would answer any questions, so let me just check to see the question box. Question is I've got 2 questions here. One is, we've just done an employee engagement survey. Can this be helpful for guiding a change program? So absolutely certain. Absolutely yes, it can. So I did not mean to imply that that employee engagement surveys aren't useful. They are very useful. My point is that employee engagement surveys tend to focus at a what I would call a symptomatic level. So every employee engagement survey I've ever seen always comes back that communications are an issue and collaboration is an issue. So in response to that, organizations will tend to launch communications programs, more newsletters, or collaboration programs, teamwork seminars, and so on. But these are symptoms. It's like if you have a fever and you take an aspirin, you will feel better because it's helping to reduce the fever, but it's not getting to the root cause of what the disease is. It's the same thing with employee engagement surveys. Communications is a symptom of a lack of clarity of accountability and authority. So this example that I gave about each manager needing to translate the communication program in appropriate terms for their team is exactly the same for all communications across the organization. So you can't publish a newsletter and expect everyone to get the right information at the right time. Similarly, with team building, there needs to be clarity of accountability and authority with respect to how work flows down the organization and how work flows across the organization, so that by building that clarity of accountability and authority, people understand how to work together so that collaboration doesn't become an issue in the way that it was before. So the effective manager survey is intended to get to root cause, while employee engagement surveys give you good information and can be very, very helpful, but just remember not to attack the symptoms, but to figure out what the root cause is. The second question here is that I made reference in the plan to one business cycle, and the question is why. And the answer to that is that you need to nurture and support and reinforce the change program for a long enough period of time that it's actually indoctrinated into and becomes a part of the business process going forward. So by supporting and nurturing that change through one entire business cycle, you've gone through each cycle where someone has to work in that new way in that phase of the business cycle. The temptation always is, as you move into it, the next step is to revert back to the comfortable way of doing it rather than the changed, even if better, way of doing it. So it's really important as you work through the business cycle, if for instance, it's a new process that goes across the organization, different parts of the organization will be involved in different ways at different times. So I picked the business cycle. Typically, it's 1 year. Some business cycles are longer than 1 year, but typically 1 year for any significant change program. And for a very significant, say, an organization design change of the entire organization, you might be talking about a 2-year change program instead. So those are the questions I had. Thank you very much for that. For those, there is a very short poll at the end of the webinar. It's 3 questions long, so if you have time to stay on, I would really appreciate your feedback to me on how we can improve the webinar. If you have any additional questions, please feel free to put it in any of those text boxes, and I can email you back with an answer, or if you want me to call you, put in your phone number or Skype, and I'll get back to you in that way. So thank you again. Today is December 16th, so we're getting close to the end of the year. So very best wishes for the season to you. I wish you a safe, a happy, and a relaxing holiday season. Thank you very much. Bye.
Hi, I'm Dwight Mahalitz, President of Effective Managers. Thank you so much for downloading the webinar. I hope that you enjoyed it and will find it useful. Feel free to check out other parts of the website for interesting downloads. Most are free, some are at a nominal charge, but I'm sure you'll find lots of interesting tools there and things that can help you be more effective. And in fact, that's what my job is. My job is to help you, help your organization be higher performing. The bottom line is that I want to start where you are, understand your problem, and provide services that can help you solve that problem and implement a solution as quickly and as effectively and as efficiently as possible. Give me a call, drop me an email. I'd love to hear from you, talk about your situation, and see if there's anything that we can do together. Thank you.